The hinge had a tired squeal that always called the room to attention before the door slammed. It called now, long and thin, and the air that came with it carried night heat, gasoline ghost, old lemon cleaner that never quite won. Then the sound that did not belong in a place of oil and leather cut through everything. A small voice, bright and ragged. "They are beating my mama." Robert's hand loosened from the bottle. Glass tapped wood once. A measured tick, and he was already moving. He did not glance to Tiny or Tank or Razor. He moved because a body that knows what it is for does not wait to be told. She was small, barefoot, the edges of her toes silvered with grit, like ground glass had brushed her. Hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. Her eyes were not round with fear. They were pulled wide, as if the neon room had leapt inside her and would not let go. Robert dropped to one knee. Concrete, cool, pressed through denim. He showed her his hands first, knuckles scarred, oil in the lines, the quiet of them. He kept his voice low enough to settle dust. "Who is hurting your mama?" "Sweetheart, Mom's boyfriend and his friends." The words stumbled, then kept going, loud, hitting her. The jukebox forgot its song. In the wake of silence came the soft shift of leather, the creak of stools, ice settling in a bucket. Without looking, Robert felt the bar tip from Talk to Purpose, the way a machine slides into its true gear. "Where?" She pointed with her whole arm. "Blue apartment, broken window. Blue apartment, broken window." The phrase printed itself in him like a stamp. A curtain snagged through glass. A cheap lock. The sound of something heavy meeting drywall. "You did good. Real good." He said it without ceremony, because brave would make it sound like this work belonged to her. Beside him, Tiny's chair scuffed back, his phone already up. The way a wrench arrives in a hand that knows its weight. Robert did not need to say dial. The number lived in the air, and Tiny caught it. Robert stood, and the room stood with him. Neon laid a red seam along his jaw. He turned, so the next gust hit him first. So the noise and light did not strike the child square. He slid her past the doorframe, where elbows might knock without meaning harm. "What is your name?" "Sophie." "I am 5. Okay. Sophie." He let her hear his breath slow, and even breath she could borrow, until hers learned the rhythm again. "Stay with me." He heard Razor set his glass down like a decision. He heard Tank roll a shoulder and find balance on the balls of his feet. The rest was movement. Nobody said, "We are coming." The floor already understood. They reached the threshold, and the heat reached back. Outside, a moth worried the beer sign. A compressor coughed. Water ticked in a gutter like a leaky clock trying to keep time. Robert spread a broad palm between Sophie's shoulders and felt a hitching breath fall toward a pattern. His skin came away damp. She kept her eyes where he aimed them, trying to stand inside his line of sight as if that could be armor. "Show me." She stepped past the cigarette burns at the sill, careful around an old bottle cap. Her voice was smaller in open air, but it did not break. "Down there. Blue paint. Broken window. Hear it." He listened. City nights never go quiet. They stack sounds until the mind gives up, but certain notes cut the stack and live by themselves. There it was, faint but sharp. The brittle surrender of something glass. The short, ugly cadence of men's voices. And beneath that, the thinner beat of a plea bruising itself against a wall. He pictured the stairwell, paint over paint, handrail loose in brackets, a stain the building manager never won. He pictured a deadbolt that would fail at the hinge. He pictured a knife, because some men reach for edges to make their hands feel larger. Robert gave Tiny one look. A look was enough. Tiny had the phone to his mouth and that exact calm that gets rookies through their first bad night. Iron horse on Fulton. Domestic in progress. Child present. Blue apartment. Broken window. We are outside. Send units. The phone's seconds glowed against Tiny's cheek. Robert did not watch them. Time has teeth. No need to offer a throat. Stay behind me, he told Sophie, pointing to the place his boots had marked. She nodded hard enough to make her hair lift and fall. He watched her swallow. He watched the small set of her shoulders change. An unfair weight settled and carried with steadiness. Inside, the air drifted back towards stools. Outside, the street made itself into a corridor with a label he did not need to say aloud. Blue apartment. A bus went by and left hot rubber. A flyer tried to escape a staple on a pole. A light buzzed, faltered, steadied. Robert let the night hand him little truths, the way a good witness collects details without knowing which one will matter. He reached down and found her hand. Not to drag, not to hurry fear, to mark the road as shared. Her fingers were cold and sticky with dust. From some floor she had bolted across to get here. She held on like she meant to leave marks. Can you see it from here? She nodded. There. Blue apartment. Broken window. The phrase sank heavier, loaded now with the picture she could not keep out. He did not need to tell her right. The fact of her standing here had proof built in. Robert measured distance with his eyes. Then with his body, a pack of men could cross it fast. A man and a child would cross it correctly. The math mattered only to tell him where fear would try to climb in. Stay to my left. He put his body into the cleanest line between the bar's light and the apartment's bad paint. Protection is not a stance you take once. It is 100 small steps placed, so someone else does not have to bleed for them. Sophie's breath smoothed. That was enough for the next step, and the next, they passed the alley where a dumpster held heat like a bad memory. A cat shouldered out of dark, became shape, unbecame it, eyes throwing back a line of neon like polished stone. Somewhere a door closed with ordinary force. Somewhere a television argued with no one. Robert kept his eyes high for windows and low for glass. He watched the deeper dark by the building where a hand could appear with a bright edge and pretend to be big. His attention spread like oil, thin enough to cover, thick enough to hold. There it was, paint that looked tired by day and mean by night. A curtain had been yanked through broken glass and hung there like a white flag. No one would honor closer now. The sounds took on edges, a fist, a breath, a voice stripped down to muscle memory and stubbornness. He tasted the air, hallway cleaner, cheap beer gone sweet. The copper ghost not new enough to speak clearly, but near. He looked at the kid and she looked back. A small exchange that did not need word. A promise, an understanding, an unsought contract both of them would keep. He angled his shoulders and took the first stair. The rail wobbled in its brackets, though someone had buried extra screws in winter. His palm brushed a spot where paint had scabbed over old tape. His heart climbed in a controlled way. All the noise in him moved outward and turned into attention. Behind him, Boots learned to be quiet. Tiny's voice was the only language allowed now. Street, unit, child again. Once, not to scare anyone, to summon the right speed. Robert paused at the landing and let Sophie come even with him. He did not hurry what fear must not trip. He pointed, and she followed the point with her whole body, the way children point when they need a grown man to see exactly what matters. Blue apartment, she said, her breath stitching the words together. Broken window. On the final step, he placed her behind his thigh and set his hand on the knob. Metal told the truth of its cheapness. He leaned, listened. Something heavy hit a wall, and the wall answered with a low complaint that traveled through studs and into his bones. The door was going to make a scene either way, so he chose the cleaner scene. Tank smiled the way. A man smiles at a task he understands. His boot met the wood like a stamp. Screws cried out. Hings surrendered. The door listed, and came back wrong. A mouth pulled off its own teeth. The room hit like a smell first. Beer sour and chemicals sharp. The skunk of something burned in a spoon, sweat gone stale. A bottle lay on its side, bleeding a tail across linoleum. A woman's leg was wrong under her. Her hair stuck to her cheek. The noise of men tried to be important, but kept shrinking under the larger noise of what they had done. "Do not look," Robert said, but the words arrived after the sight. Sophie saw the red map the room had drawn on her mother, and her scream was small, but it changed the temperature. Derek had a knife in his hand, and the blade shook like it wanted a steadier man. "Get out of my house," he said, and the words were thin because they were a lie. Razor's laugh did not bother to pretend. "Your house." He lifted paper slick with fingerprints. "Lease," says Jennifer. The page fluttered once in the fan's breath like it was trying to leave. The knife flicked toward the child. The room closed around that motion. Robert moved, and the blade skated across leather and found nothing of her. He caught Derek's wrist and squeezed until bones remembered their job. The knife clapped to the floor like it had been waiting for permission to rest. "You touch that child, and I will end you." One of the other men tried to think with his legs and ran. Tank clotheslined him into the kind of sleep that keeps a body on a floor. The other tripped on loyalty and decided the carpet was as good a place as any. Robert went to the woman. He did not say anything the girl would remember as fear. 2 fingers to the neck, and the room held its breath to listen with him. Pulse weak. She is alive. Sirens began as something you believe in before you hear, and then swelled into sound and pressed blue against glass. Tiny's calm fed a dispatcher every small fact that becomes a lifeline later. Names, street, broken window, threat level. The numbers on his phone climbed without mercy. Robert did not look. Time was doing its job. He would do his. Boots hit the threshold. Radios, spit-clipped alphabet. Detective Martinez took inventory quicker than questions could form. "What happened?" "We heard screaming," Robert said. "They were." He did not finish. The room finished for him. Derek began to stack words like armor. "They broke in." "Sir," Martinez said, looking at the blood that was not his. "Do not." Paramedics flowed through the wreckage with the economy of those who have learned to make seconds obey. Multiple fractures. Possible internal. Jennifer's name was spoken into the air and written into a chart that would later become a witness. Family only. A paramedic would say. There would be rules that made sense on paper and not in rooms like this. A new rhythm entered the hallway, measured and certain, heels on tile that did not hurry. The door frame admitted a woman wearing a coat over a nightgown. Hair secured by hands that never miss when it matters. The air around her carried a courtroom's weather. Gavel in a pocket. Voice like a stamp. "I am authorizing emergency custody to whomever this child chooses." Sophie looked at the black on Robert's shoulder where the knife had slid. At the red on her mother, at the weight of authority standing in a nightgown. She raised both arms to Robert, a surrender and a demand. He lifted her. She was lighter than the things he carried that could not be set down. "Can you take care of me until Mama gets better?" "Yeah." "Baby," he said, steady as forged steel. "We have you." The ambulance waited with its doors open like a mouth that meant to lend breath. Paramedics lifted Jennifer with motions that made seconds obey. Plastic buckles clicked in a rhythm that felt like order finding its feet. Tape hissed. A mask misted and cleared. A monitor woke into a thin, artificial pulse. Not human, and yet the closest thing to hope the street could manufacture. Detective Martinez moved through the wreckage without staring at it. A question to a medic, a line on a form, a nod that meant continue. Judge Williams spoke once and turned paper into a floor under everyone. Emergency custody recorded. Go with the child. The coat over the nightgown did not diminish her weight. It sharpened it, improvised authority, absolute for exactly as long as the crisis required. Robert did not spend the judge's seconds with thanks. He met her eyes long enough to pass a message that did not need words. He would hold up his end of the process. He would keep his side clean so the system had something accurate to grab. She understood and stepped back into the river of uniforms that would inventory what the room had become. Knife-bagged, photos, the lease page laid flat and numbered, the chain already beginning because chains matter when men lie about what they have done. He bent Sophie, and he shared one line through the open door. "We are going to the hospital," he said. "Stay with me." Simple sentence for a job that would be anything but outside. Night heat stuck to skin. Sirens braided with the low diesel thrum that makes a city remember it has arteries. The ambulance idled. Headlights ran across spilled glass until the shards looked like they had intentions of their own. Tiny's phone glowed blue against his cheek. "Units on scene," he told the dispatcher. "Victim transported. Child safe with guardian." His tone did not rise or fall. It was a tool, not a mood. Tank and Razor took the apartment's door and became a wall you could see from the street. They were not posturing. They were performing assignments. Keep the threshold clean. Keep witnesses safe enough to stay put. Keep the mess from growing a new branch. The bar behind them began its own discipline. A man to speak to officers. A man to sweep. A bottle set aside, because some nights you do not mop until the reasons for blood have been named out loud by someone with a pen. Martinez stepped to Robert's shoulder. "We will need statements," she said. "Not now. Later. You take the child. We will be at county," he said. "You will find us." She read the assurance for what it was. He would not disappear. He would not make her chase a ghost. A paramedic said family only is habit, and Robert let the man see the judge's signature in the air between them. The medic adjusted. "She rides in front," he said, and opened the passenger door. Sophie looked at the seat like a cliff. Robert lifted her as if weight were a thing he knew where to put. He buckled her in with the same economy he used on a torque wrench. Quick and sure, and checked the latch again because checking is what keeps machines and people from failing. Her sneaker tapped the glove box once. A small sound. A reflex. She froze, as if noise could break a new piece of tonight. He tapped the rubber toe with a knuckle. "You are fine," he said. She nodded. The nod carried more weight than many sentences. The doors swung and latched. Through a rectangle of glass he could see the pale turn of Jennifer's cheek and the fog rise and fall inside the mask. In a metronome a machine insisted on. He climbed into Tiny's truck without thinking about the choice. He drove because driving is part of what he is. Razor took the passenger seat sideways, eyes on the rear doors of the ambulance, as if he could shove that vehicle faster with a look. Tank rolled the lot gate closed and followed. An engine low and disciplined, never crowding the lights. They fell in behind the ambulance like a trailer that knew its purpose. The city peeled open and offered lanes. Red and blue washed windshields and ran back along chrome and paint, pooling in the edges of the world. Robert rode that light without letting it inside his hands. The wheel sat easy under his palm. His knuckles did not whiten. Everything about his movement was exact and spare. The way a man who fixes machines turns his body into a gauge. He checked the mirror every few breaths. Sophie's face was small in the ambulance window, an oval turned forward and steady. He could not hear her, but he liked the shape of her not crying. She was saving that for when it would be useful. He merged where the ambulance signaled and held distance that let paramedics make sudden choices without fear of a bumper. A sedan panicked ahead and braked hard. He let the mistake be, kept space, watched its heat smell drift backward and fall away. A cyclist froze in a crosswalk, then stepped back. He did not use the horn. Sound is a blade you only draw when a cut is necessary. The night shone off wet pavement, though no rain fell. Storefronts blurred into suggestions. Each traffic light turned the right color in time, as if the city itself had formed a quiet opinion about what mattered. Narration slid into the thin place between siren and engine, and told a truth the apartment had not held. He was the man Derek least expected. Clean record. Owner of an auto shop that kept paper in order and tools where they belonged. A life arranged on purpose, so that when a child chose him, the case for him would be simple. At county, the guard raised the arm before the button required it. The ambulance took the ramp at the angle that made seconds shave. Robert chose the lower lot and parked where his eyes could own the doors the stretcher would use. Razor was out before rubber stilled. Tank cut his engine in a place that did not block anyone with work to do. Tiny eased into a space with room for a quick departure, because sometimes exits want as much attention as entries. The ambulance opened, and the team came backward, the cot riding like a boat through a bright tide. Elevator doors hemmed, polite as if ignorant of the hour's wait. Sophie climbed down from the front with knees that tested their job once, and then remembered the task. She turned until she found Robert by the shape of him and did not lower her arms until he lifted her. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and burned coffee. Voices layered and canceled each other. A television played a sport without a soundtrack. A nurse behind glass watched the cot pass with the flat attention of someone who would move exactly when movement mattered and not before. Family only. A paramedic said again under breath. Judge's order. Martinez answered from the elevator, already carrying a fresh printout. The paper still held the warmth of ink that had only just been pressed into it. She lifted it a fraction. Family opened a door rather than closing one. Robert set Sophie on a plastic chair that tried to be kind by being bright. He crouched to bring his promise into legible height. I am going to talk to the nurse, he said. You will sit here where I can see you. Okay, she said. You need water, he said, and she realized thirst only when named. He pointed at the fountain 6 paces away, and then marked a spot with his boot on the floor next to her sneakers. Our place. She nodded. He stood, went to the desk, and turned names and times into entries a system could accept. Jennifer. Street. Broken window. Child present. Witness. Emergency custody. He gave the clock time exactly as the clock insisted, because in buildings like this, the truth of the second hand matters. The nurse's eyes softened by a degree for the child and returned to their level lake. Trauma Bay, she said. Surgeon on call. She printed a strip that would become a tag and slid a pen for a witness line. He signed where a line allowed and wrote the time again. Ink on paper, small weights laid on a scale that would be read later. He did not rush the pen. He did not decorate the letters. He wrote the way he moved, exact and spare. He brought a paper cup. Sophie sipped as though water might spill her last thin grip. It did not. She handed the cup back at the exact second. Her hand stopped shaking, as if the moment had been scheduled. Tiny appeared with a stack of forms he had coaxed from a reluctant desk down the hall. The restraining order packet traveled into Martinez's hand. She nodded once, respect admitted, and pulled a deputy from a current of uniforms. The deputy read each block, slid the page, stamped the time with a rubber rectangle that thudded like a good answer. Robert took the witness line, placed his name there, and felt the order harden from idea to boundary. A signature is not decoration. It is a hinge that keeps a door from swinging back the wrong way. Razor lifted his chin toward the vending machines and gift kiosk. Sophie tracked the motion. "We can find something to color," he said without softening his voice into a caricature of kindness, "if it keeps the quiet from getting too loud." She blinked, surprised at gentleness, delivered without show. Robert said, "We will wait here. We will draw next to our place." Razor returned with a small packet of crayons and a cheap coloring book, whose cover made a promise about castles that did not belong to this hour. Sophie opened to a blank page and ignored the printed lines. She drew a motorcycle first because a thing that moves on purpose is the opposite of feeling stuck. She drew a small helmet in front and a larger one behind, because even fearless girls borrow mass when the world insists on scale. "Good lines," Robert said in a voice that lived at the level of fact. A resident in blue scrubs passed, saw the triangle of man-child page, and made a tiny bow with his head. The kind of quiet gratitude strangers carry home and unpack later. He did not intrude. He kept the hallway's flow intact. The television changed pictures. The nurse called a name that did not belong to them. The clock said what clocks say. Robert shifted his weight now and then to keep a knee honest. He watched doors. He watched the child. He made calm a weight and laid it on the room so it would not float away. Martinez came back with a transparent bag. Inside lay the knife, tagged with initials, date, time, location. The seal signed where it should be. She held it a finger's width high, then lowered it. "Chain started," she said. "The hospital garage cameras cover every angle. If he tries anything here later, we will not argue about what we saw. He will try," Robert said, plain as a typed line. "We will be ready," she said. "You be here." He nodded. The agreement sat like a tool on a bench, useful and at hand. Sophie finished the motorcycle and drew a rectangle with wheels and a bed and a woman who slept. She added a blue square on the side where a window would be. She wrote a single word with careful letters. A word children learn early and then defend with everything they have. "Mama." Robert placed his palm on the table beside the drawing and let his warmth reach the paper. "They are in the room where they fix what people break," he said. "They will do their part. We will do ours." "What is ours?" she asked. "We stay," he said. "We eat when food arrives. We sleep when told it is smart. We sign what needs signing. We tell the truth when asked. We do not leave the doors alone." She nodded again, and the nod weighed more than before. "Okay." The elevator chimed. A cot returned empty as a metal promise ready for the next demand. A surgeon in a lead apron cut across the lobby without breaking stride. A clerk hugged a stack of folders like birds. A janitor rolled a bucket whose surface was as calm as a small lake before wind. The night moved forward with the insistence of a machine that refuses to skip a gear. Robert sat with his back to a wall and angled his body so he owned the sight lines that mattered. Door, elevator, hallway, nurse. He placed his body between the child and everything else. Discipline is not loud. It is 1,000 small choices arranged without spectacle. Tiny brought a paper bag with 2 sandwiches and left it by Robert's boot without comment. Razor leaned against a column and pretended to doze while his eyes measured the room. Tank took a position near the vending bank, so anyone approaching from that side met a wall they had not expected. The team was not a gang. It was a unit, roles assigned, edges held, pressure made orderly. The nurse lifted her chin at Robert. "It will be ours," she said. "I will tell you when the surgeon wants to talk." "We will be here," he said. No one asked for promises. No one offered any beyond the work they could do now. The clock rounded a mark. Somewhere deep, a heavy door sealed behind a set of hands that had taken responsibility for blood that wanted to wander, and bones that had forgotten their geometry. Robert looked once toward that sealed hallway and then let his eyes settle on the rise and fall of the child's breath. He chose the smaller sound because it was the one he could hold. He did not rehearse speeches. He did not imagine outcomes. He did not let his mind replay the arc of a blade or the angle of a wrist. He sat where a man sits when a child has raised both arms and asked, and a judge has stamped, and a system has begun to move in the right direction because someone has given it clean lines to grip. He stayed. He kept calm heavy. He turned aftermath into discipline. And in the fluorescent quiet of a hospital that belongs to everyone and to no one, he lifted the weight that was his and did not set it down. County carried a light that flattened color and made truth easier to read. The elevator swallowed the stretcher and breathed it out again into a corridor, where doors wore small red eyes that meant "do not enter." The cot turned and disappeared behind one of those eyes. The doors sighed shut and held their line. Robert set Sophie on the chair they had claimed and mapped the lobby with the care he would give a stubborn engine. Door, desk, elevators, hallway, vending bank, bathrooms, exits, angles. He placed himself so every path crossed his attention. Tiny drifted to registration with patient courtesy. Razor leaned his back to a column and let his eyelids lower into a false rest that was not rest at all. Tank stood near the machines with his arms loose, an invitation to approach and a warning not to. Behind glass, a nurse fed labels into a small printer. The machine chattered and spat narrow stickers that caught names and times. Wristband text bloomed and slid away toward the doors with the red lights. Another nurse looked from Sophie to Robert and adjusted her expression by the smallest degree, as if she carried two kinds of weather on the same face and knew which one to set down. The television tried a forecast, gave up, and returned to a sport with the sound muted. A janitor leaned on his mop handle and allowed his eyes a single slow blink before he moved the bucket again. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and a coffee pot that had boiled past kindness. Robert's phone buzzed once against his thigh, the private vibration he allowed for the few names that could interrupt without asking. He glanced. A message from Tiny. Lease verified. He looked up. Tiny lifted a slim folder and tapped it twice with two knuckles. Copy. Team stamped. Clerk signed. The paper would obey a courtroom better than any mouth in that blue apartment ever would. Robert slid the message back into his pocket the way a mechanic slides a known wrench into the top drawer, so his hand can find it in the dark. Sophie drew steady lines on the motorcycle she had sketched, cross-hatching the tires until her breathing evened into the same rhythm. Robert could see how hard she had hauled herself into a straight line and kept it there. He could also see where that line might begin to tremble. He timed his words to the breath before that tremble. He kept them small. You did good. Real good. She did not look up. She nodded once. A tight nod, the kind he liked to see when a torque wrench clicked and a grown man knew to stop. Detective Martinez came through the automatic doors with a deputy at her shoulder. The hurry of the scene had drained out of her. What remained was the stillness of a person carrying facts arranged in order. She held up a clear evidence bag by one corner. Inside lay a cheap knife that looked ashamed beneath hospital light. A white seal ran along the top with date, time, location, and initials written clean. The ink still shone. Chain started, she said. Lease copied and logged. Photographs secured. Statements later. After the surgeon speaks, she let her eyes rest on Sophie without selling comfort like a product. An advocate will copy the custody order into the file. That is procedure, not doubt. It will not change where the child goes when this night is done. Robert did not spend her seconds with thanks. He spent them with alignment. We will be here when ink or voice is needed. You will have both. Clean. Clean was the word he trusted. Clean is a surface you can torque against. Clean is a record that does not smear. Clean is the kind of answer a system cannot pretend not to understand. Martinez tucked the knife under her arm as if it were hers until it belonged to a locker. Derek will try to flip it, she said. He will say you broke in. He will say you wanted the fight. He will throw the word chaos and hope no one checks where the other words fall. He will try, Robert said. She let her mouth tip the smallest fraction. He chose the wrong night to try. Then she was gone down a hallway of locked rooms where evidence learns to survive cross-examination. A hospital security officer followed Tiny back from a desk that guarded forms like treasure. We will register the guardian, the officer said, glancing once at Sophie with respect that did not imitate kindness. It keeps the floor calm if questions come from the wrong mouths. Emergency order, Tiny said, sliding Judge Williams's page forward. The officer read it, let the paper decide his face, and nodded. He wrote a name on a badge and offered a lanyard. Robert pointed to Tiny. The officer looped it over Tiny's neck. Robert already wore the only credential that mattered in this square of light. A child had chosen him, and a judge had stamped that choice into law. Sophie put one crayon down and lifted another. She changed color, the way a driver changes lanes with a shoulder check. She started a new page, drew a rectangle on wheels, then a blue square near the top. Ambulance, she said. The word landed and stayed. Good eyes, Robert said. Windows belong there. Why? She asked, too tired to frame a larger question. So they can look out without stopping the work. He said, satisfied. She returned to the dots along the side of the vehicle. She made too many, counted, then scratched one away with the edge of the wax. He liked the correction more than a perfect line. Razor peeled off the column without changing expression, went to the kiosk, and returned with a small pack of pretzels and a bottle labeled apple that was more patience than fruit. He set them down like offerings to a quiet god and resumed his lean. Tank stayed where the vending bank made a false corner, watching the slow motion of the room and the fast ones at its edges. A woman in scrubs stopped at the edge of their square of floor. Social work, she said, showing her badge without making a production of it. My name is Claire. I am here to copy the order and note placement. Tiny slid the paper. She read without chatter, copied without filling silence with soft words. Then she addressed Sophie. Not the adults. Do you need anything while you wait? Sophie looked to Robert. He let his face remain what it was. You can ask, he said. If it is smart, we say yes. Water, Sophie said. And tape. Tape, Claire repeated, and smiled. Because specificity is comforting. For the drawing, Sophie added, it will fall. Claire returned with a plastic cup and a small strip torn from a roll. Sophie drank and taped her picture to the back of the chair, with the solemnity of raising a flag on a new piece of ground. Claire left without calling anyone brave or sweet. She left a trail of procedure behind her, like a path people could walk without getting lost. Robert's phone buzzed again, a message from the shop. A photograph appeared. His office wall, business license in a cheap black frame, glass clean. The date sat clear as a promise. Beside it, 3 photographs of his daughters at 3 different moments of completion. The image carried its own metadata along the bottom edge, time and address stamped by a machine that did not know it was helping an argument. The echo did its work, not speeches, not defense. A quiet proof that explained why the system trusted him when he said, "We have you." He slid the image away and filed it where the good tools live. A resident in a paper cap crossed the lobby, one palm brushing the desk. As he passed the way a swimmer touches a wall to turn. He went through the red light doors. Minutes did what minutes do when hurt waits. They stretched, thin, snapped back. Stretched again. Tiny returned from a small orbit with a line of status. Detective has the garage camera mat. All angles covered. Good, Robert said. If he comes, we let the building tell the story. We do not need to talk loud if the walls are doing the listening, Tiny said, folding his big hands and making them still. Sophie began another page. She drew a doorway with a smaller door inside it. She added a dot above, and she colored the dot red. What is that? Robert asked. Light, she said. Red means busy. He looked at her red dot, then at the real one glowing over trauma too. Right, he said. Razor's phone blinked. A message from a patrol cop who owed him nothing and liked him anyway. The friends are in cuffs. Not brave now. Names logged. Statements to follow. A small payoff. Correcte direction. Robert did not let satisfaction grow a face. He put the line where it belonged, with the other small weights that would keep the big answer from tilting. A chaplain drifted through with the steady presence of a river. He offered no words, which Robert appreciated. Not everything needs voice to be useful. He allowed himself half a sandwich when Sophie yawned in small silent jolts. He ate with exact chews and clean hands. Fuel, not comfort. He slid the other half back into the bag and tucked it inside his jacket like a promise made to the body that carries promises for others. Time moved. The red square held. An orderly pushed a tray and let one wheel rattle long enough to blame the floor. A code call stuttered and settled. A printer scolded its emptiness. The clock hands did nothing dramatic and were more trustworthy for it. Claire returned with a copy of the custody order clipped to a thicker file. She made notes with dates and times and names spelled correctly. She nodded to Robert and did not explain what he already understood. Paper had caught up. If anyone argued later, the file would answer, even if no one felt like talking. A deputy stepped close and said restraining order entered, service pending. The words were simple and strong. Entered meant the thing lived in a place where it could be found without favor. Pending meant a badge would put paper in Derek's hand, and the city would attach a rule to him like a weight he could not hide from. Lease had been the thing he claimed as power. Restraining order was the rule the city claimed as law. One was a piece of paper that had let him pretend, the other was a piece of paper that would end his pretending. Sophie's head tipped and found Robert's rolled jacket. Even asleep, she kept 2 fingers hooked in the fold of his leather like a receipt. He adjusted so her neck lay easy, and then let his own head meet the cool wall for a breath. He did not close his eyes. He set his mind on its smallest loop and ran it without heat. Door, desk, elevators, hallway, nurse, door, desk, elevators, hallway, nurse. He rode the light and did not let it into his hands. Tank shifted once. A man across the room looked at Tank, reconsidered the line his feet had been drawing, and sat down. Razor let his false nap deepen while one eye watched reflections in a dark pane. Tiny balanced a form on his knee and printed witness lines in careful block letters. Squares a prosecutor could stack into a day that made sense. The red light over Trauma 2 blinked once and steadied. Somewhere beyond it, a cut was being made that did not belong to violence. It belonged to repair. Robert watched the pulse and did not pray or bargain. He placed the weight he had where it could do its job. He looked once toward the glass doors that led down to the garage. The cameras there would be watching the lanes and the shadowed corners, the concrete ribs of the structure, the ragged mouth of the ramp. He could see the angles in his mind, the overlay of time, stamped frames. He pictured a thin man rehearsing a swagger into apology, and apology into threat. He let the picture form so he could set it down. "He will try something," Robert said, almost gently, like a diagnosis. "We will be here," Tiny answered. "We will let the building speak." Razor added, without opening his eyes, "We will keep the door smaller for him." Tank said, almost cheerful. The doors with the red light trembled, the way doors do when the pressure behind them changes. A nurse pushed through carrying nothing. She lifted her chin at the desk. A phone rang as if it had been waiting for permission. The clerk listened, looked at a page, then at Robert. "The surgeon wants family in the consult room." Robert rose without jolting the child. He slid one arm under her and another under her drawing so no page would tear. Her warm exhale landed against his collar and trusted him enough to be heavy. He nodded once to Tiny. The man was already moving, papers gathered, names on cards pocketed, copies squared into a folder that would not spill. Razor straightened, shoulders making that quiet shape that keeps nonsense away. Tank shifted to the hallway entrance to make the world narrower for trouble. The security officer stepped back just enough to let them pass. Martinez reappeared at the far end with a look that said she would be exactly where she needed to be when words turned into the next thing. Robert crossed the threshold into the consult room. The fluorescent silence in there was a different kind of loud. A table waited with 2 boxes of tissue pretending to be useful. A clock kept perfect time for no one. The inner door opened. A surgeon in a cap tugged his mask down and set his eyes. His hands were clean in the way that only work can make hands clean. "Tell me," Robert said, and let the words enter the room like a lever he had decided to pull. The consult room held fluorescent quiet, a table with 2 boxes of tissue pretending to be useful, and a clock that kept perfect time for no one. The surgeon tugged his mask down and set steady eyes on Robert. His hands were clean in the way only work can make hands clean. "She made it through the first round," he said, voice paired to what mattered. "Multiple fractures repères. We controlled a bleed. The next day will decide what the body accepts. Intensive care. Machines will do heavy work while she rests. Visits will be short. Family only." Family only stayed in the air 1 second longer than every other phrase, like a rule that believed itself unbreakable. Robert nodded once, not to bargain with medicine, but to acknowledge a border he would cross with paper, not volume. "Thank you," he said. 2 words set down like tools, exact and spare. He stepped back into the bright square of the waiting room. Sophie slept against his rolled jacket, 2 fingers hooked in the fold of leather, like a receipt you keep because it proves a promise. Tiny sat with the emergency custody orders squared into a folder that refused to spill. Razor leaned on a column with eyelids lowered to a false rest that still saw the room. Tank watched the hallway like a gate that knows its field. The nurse at the desk lifted her chin when she saw them, eyes shifting tone by a degree for a sleeping child. Tiny moved first, because teams that work know their assignments without saying them. "Order for custody," he said, and slid Judge Williams's page under glass. "The way you place a calibrated tool on a bench, names and time at the top, signature like a gavel frozen mid-strike." The nurse stamped a hospital copy, clipped it to the thin chart, and called upstairs. "Emergency custody on file. Child may accompany guardian for brief visits. When the team allows." She hung up and looked at Robert with the frank calm of a person who believes in rules that do not apologize for existing. "Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed," she said. "Follow ours, and we will make room." He inclined his head. He did not say grateful. He performed it by making her job easier. Detective Martinez came from a corridor of locked doors, with a deputy at her shoulder, and documents that did not rattle. Restraining order entered. She said, "Service pending. The paper will find him the next time a badge sees him." Copies posted to the chart. Her gaze tracked to the glass leading to the garage. "Cameras are live." She added, "If he tries anything here, the building will do the remembering for us." "He will try something," Robert said, almost gently, the way a mechanic states the failure mode of a part he has seen 100 times. "We will be here," Tiny said. "We will let the walls speak," Razor murmured without opening his eyes. "We will keep the hallway narrow for nonsense," Tank said, almost cheerful. Martinez let a fraction of a smile show. "Good," she said. "Let him collide with the city's rule instead of yours." She set a clear evidence bag on the corner of the desk, where the nurse could see it without touching it. Inside lay the knife, the seal labeled with place. "Our initials." "Chain started," she said. "The lease copy is logged with the case. The difference matters." He treated paper like power only when it praised him. "Tonight paper is the rule that belongs to all of us." Sophie woke as if pulled up by a thin thread and slid off the chair. She smoothed the page she had taped there earlier, the ambulance with the little window and the corrected dots. She added a small red square above a drawn doorway and spoke almost to herself. "Red means busy." The nurse heard and allowed herself one quiet nod at the accuracy. A social worker arrived with the gait of someone who knows how to enter water without making a splash. "Claire," she said, showing a badge without asking anyone to admire it. "I have copied the order. It lives in the file now. I need to confirm placement for the night." Robert looked to Sophie and then to Claire. "We will be here," he said. "The girl stays with me." Claire addressed Sophie. "Not the adults. Do you want that?" she asked, voice a fine thread that tied things together without making knots. Sophie raised both arms toward Robert, a surrender and a demand in one gesture. Claire nodded and wrote one clean line. "Guardian placement confirmed by child selection and court order on file." She wrote the hour as the wall clock insisted and slid a copy into the chart. She left without selling comfort like a product. Robert's phone hummed. A photo arrived from the shop, his office wall. "Business license, clean in glass. Date legible." And along it 3 pictures of his daughters at 3 different finish lines. The image carried its own metadata stamped along the bottom edge by a machine that did not know it was building trust. He filed it inside his head where good tools live. The echo he needed had already sounded in this room. The system recognized him without speeches because he had arranged his life to be legible on paper. The nurse lifted her chin again. "Intensive care will allow a short visit now," she said. "1 guardian. 1 child. No touching the lines. No leaning on rails. We will follow your rules," Robert said. He lifted Sophie and followed the nurse down a hallway that talked in beeps and low forced air and the rustle of gowns. Double doors wore a red eye. The nurse pressed a code. The eye went dark. Doors sighed open. Inside, the light changed shape. Machines stood like careful animals, keeping their distance while doing their duty. A curtain breathed against a vent. A monitor traced a green mountain range, insisting on rhythm. Jennifer lay among lines and plastic, her skin a shade. It had not been this morning. Sophie's breath hiccuped. Robert angled his body so the sound met him, and did not break into a sob that might scare the room. He adjusted his grip so her weight lived on muscle, not bone, and took measured steps until Sophie could see her mother's face. "Mama," she whispered. The syllables were small, but they put weight in the air. Robert kept his voice low. "She did not go anywhere without telling us," he said. "She is here. She hears, even when her eyes do not help. Sophie nodded as if the explanation matched something her body already understood. She placed her palm against Robert's chest and decided that was close enough to touching her mother. The monitor did not argue. The nurse watched and did not interfere. Time stretched thin, then returned to its length. The nurse lifted a hand, a small gesture with large authority. Time. Robert stepped back. Sophie leaned once, as if leaving a piece of herself on the edge of the bed, then settled in his hold. Outside. The red eye woke. Doors met each other clean. The nurse entered a note and said what she had already taught with practice. You followed rules. Come again when the hour changes. Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed. He believed her. He believed in rules that carried weight so small mercies could stand without slipping. He thanked her with a small tilt of his head and carried Sophie back through a corridor that measures success in beeps. The lobby felt too bright after that light. The floor cleaner too loud. Claire waited with the file under her arm. The judge is still on call, she said. She prefers to close loops. She would like a brief confirmation by phone. We can use the conference room. Now, Robert said. The conference room held a table scarred by meetings and a speakerphone that did not mind being the center of attention. Claire dialed and named the case. Judge Williams's voice came through with the careful calm that turns law into something a human can carry. Confirm for the record, she said. Child, who did you choose? Him, Sophie said, pointing with her whole arm even though no one could see it. The gesture rose and landed on the table like a stamp. And guardian, said the judge, do you accept the obligations named in this order? I do, Robert said, 2 words landing like metal on an anvil. The city recognizes what the knight already knew, the judge said, and the sentence sounded like a blessing made of policy. Custody affirmed until the mother can speak for herself. Follow hospital rules. Cooperate with detectives. Keep the child safe. We will, Robert said. The we included the team waiting in the hall, the nurse bending over a chart, the cameras recording the garage, the file that would not lose itself. The we included a black-framed license and 3 photographs that had raised him as surely as he had raised the girls inside them. When the call ended, Claire noted the exact hour and name and slid a copy into the file. If you need me, she said, ask the desk. I will be nearby. Thank you, Robert said, tightening the words to specification. She left as quietly as she had arrived. Martinez appeared in the doorway with a look that refused to interrupt anything working. The friends are writing, she said. Their first stories do not match their third stories. A prosecutor will enjoy that later. Sleep when you can. I have a car posted at the ramp. If he shows, I want your bodies behind a door, and my body in front of his. He will try, Robert said, not as fear, but as weather. Then let him meet rain on the ramp, she said, and was gone. Sophie tugged Robert's sleeve. Do we sleep here? She asked, as if sleep were a room with a door that could be shut. We sleep in shifts, he said. We eat when food arrives. We sign what the nurse places in front of us. We keep our spot. Rules are our fence. She nodded, and the nod carried the same practical weight he had come to rely on. He set her back in the bright plastic chair that had become a house for the night. She picked up a crayon and drew a line under her red square, underlining the rule as if ink could anchor hope. It could. Tiny eased a paper bag toward Robert with his boot. Razor dragged a shoe sole along tile in a long, soft line that told a man across the room this was not a curious night. Tank shifted enough to make a shadow larger. The nurse raised her chin. Hour will turn soon, she said. The team will allow another brief visit on the half and on the hour. Keep it short. Keep it quiet. We will, Robert said. The clock hands moved with calm insistence. The red eye pulsed. Somewhere behind it, breath was borrowed and returned. Paper had settled on Derek like a weight with an address. Not a plea, not a threat, a rule that did not care how loud he spoke. The lease he had waved like a flag had become a leaf in a file. The restraining order would be the city's hand on his chest. He would meet it not because Robert shouted, but because procedure had been obeyed. A phone rang at the desk, sharp and polite. The nurse listened, then looked at Robert, and toward the door of the consult room. The surgeon would like family again, she said. Robert stood with weight centered and hands steady, the way a man stands when the next sentence might fasten a night or break it. Sophie reached for him. He lifted her and felt how fierce and small can live in the same body. Who speaks for her? The nurse asked, purely as a form. I do, Robert said, and walked toward the door where the answer waited. Night at County settled into a rhythm that filed the sharp edges off panic. The clock on the wall drew its smooth circle and refused to make drama out of minutes. The red light above the intensive care doors blinked now and then to remind the room that rules were awake. Robert learned the lobby in layers the way a mechanic learns a new engine by the sound it refuses to make. He set Sophie in their bright plastic chair and tucked his rolled jacket under her head. 2 fingers still held the fold of leather. The way a hand keeps a receipt that matters. Tiny squared the emergency custody order once more and slid it into a folder that did not spill, edges aligned like teeth on a gear. Razor adjusted his lean until he could read the elevator in a dark pane without turning his head. Tank took the long side of the hallway and became a patient wall. Behind glass, the nurse moved like a metronome that listened. A call, 2 neat lines on a chart, a lifted chin that told the room what to do without saying it. A volunteer rolled by with a cart full of books no one wanted but everyone liked to see, because order is a kind of kindness, and kindness does not mind being ordinary. Robert kept his phone face down. The image inside it lived in his mind anyway. License in glass, name printed clean, date as firm as a hand on a shoulder. 3 frames with 3 daughters at 3 different finish lines. That echo had done its work. The staff looked at him and saw legibility. He had built a life the system could read, not a speech, a tool. Sophie woke and drifted, and woke for real. She cleared her face with her sleeve, like a person wiping fog from a window. As the hour turned, lived in her eyes more than her mouth. Robert glanced to the nurse, who glanced to the screen and to the red light. He could tell by her shoulders that yes was close. He rested a warm palm between Sophie's shoulder blades until breath found a steady gear. We will do this like work, he said. We will make a list and follow it until the list becomes a road. She nodded and took it as a task, not a comfort. Task has steps. She chose a blue crayon because tonight had taught her that blue could be a color and a rule. She drew a small red square and underlined it with care. Red mind's busy, she said, and the nurse allowed herself a small approving smile without lifting her eyes from the chart. Detective Martinez returned with a deputy who looked like a man recently instructed to be exact and secretly pleased by the assignment. He carried forms and a small metal tray with a square stamp that waited like a silent verdict. Service team in motion, Martinez said. The restraining order is in the system. The first badge that touches him will put the paper in his hand. Copy for the chart. Copy for you. Her gaze slid to the glass that led toward the garage. Cameras are live. If he tries a performance here, the building will do the remembering, and the remembering will not be kind to him. He will try something, Robert said, almost gentle, as if diagnosing a known failure mode. We will be ready, Martinez answered. Tiny passed the service instruction to the nurse. The header was clean. The body carried words that had learned to do their job, no contact of any kind, no exceptions. Immediate arrest on violation. Robert read it like a torque spec and signed the witness line where it waited. The deputy pressed the stamp into ink, set it down in one square thud, and lifted it away. The black rectangle remained. Time, place, initials, a small weight added to the right side of a scale. The half-hour clicked into place like a tooth finding its mate. The nurse lifted her chin. One guardian, one child, short and quiet. Robert lifted Sophie, and they walked the corridor that now felt like a steady machine. Doors sighed. Air moved. A monitor kept its green mountain range marching. At the bedside, Sophie did what she had learned. She set her palm against Robert's chest and called that close enough. "Mama," she said. Not a cry, a report. "We are here." We stayed. The nurse wrote one line that said, "Visit occurred and did not need to say more, because the way they behaved would do the rest of the talking if anyone ever asked." Back in the lobby, the volunteer offered a coloring pad. Sophie took the blank one and taped it under her earlier page. She drew a doorway with a tiny square above it and shaded the square red. "That one," she said, looking toward the consult room. Robert liked what she was building. She was building a map of rules that told the truth about themselves. Food arrived. The way hospital food arrives, wrapped and apologetic. Tiny nudged a brown bag with the side of his boot and pretended that had not happened when Robert picked it up. They ate like men on shift. Eat, chew, swallow, wipe, done. Fuel, not comfort. Sophie took 3 careful bites and offered the rest to Tank. Tank accepted it, as if the transfer were part of a solemn oath, and then ate in 2 slow bites that made the oath look complete. A quiet hour unfurled into the kind of work Robert trusted. Papers asked for signatures. Nurses asked for confirmation. Claire from social work asked for a number that matched the one on the license Robert had photographed earlier. He allowed his life to enter the file one neat piece at a time. Business license, shop address, 2 employees who could be reached when the clock misbehaved. He wrote the letters large and clean. If you write a name the way you torque a bolt, you do not have to do it twice. Sophie grew heavier where she sat. Her head found the rolled jacket, then the leather. Even in sleep, she kept 2 fingers in the fold, like a receipt for his promise. The television cycled a game that had ended before dinner and would keep ending every half hour until dawn. The janitor drew a clean line along tile and looked at it like it might be the one line that saved the night. Martinez came back with the deputy and a laminated map of the garage camera grid. Entrances marked, angles named, blind corners that were not blind anymore. Times printed small along the bottom. She spread it on the counter. "I am not looking for escape routes," Robert said. "I am looking for the angle that arrests him twice. Once on camera, once in hand." Martinez tapped 3 squares. "Ramp mouth," she said. "East stair landing. 3rd level pillar row. If he comes with a story, the building will write the ending." Robert memorized the boxes and the numbers beneath them. He pictured a thin man trying to rehearse swagger into apology, and apology into threat. He set the picture down where it belonged. "He will try something," he said again. The line was not fear, it was weather. "We will be ready," Martinez said again, and the words did not feel like theater. They felt like a pre-flight check. Sophie stirred and sat up and reached for a green crayon this time. She drew a small circle in the corner of her page and shaded it lightly. "Green means try," she said. She underlined both squares, red and green, with the kind of care that turns lines into law. Robert watched the underlines land and felt something inside the hour settle. The child was building a code that matched the building. The nurse looked up from the chart and set the line that had become the chapter's spine. Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed, she said. She did not make it a sermon. She made it a fact. Robert inclined his head. He did not wear the hospital lanyard. He did not need plastic. He had a clean record and a court order, and both were better business cards than any badge. He kept them visible without flashing them. He let the staff see procedure attached to him like a quiet shadow. He did not demand. He did not explain. He complied with exactness until compliance turned into protection. The deputy returned with mild satisfaction he did not hide. Service complete, he said. Copy signed. Time and place logged. The nurse angled the page to a dry patch and pressed the stamp. The ink left a black rectangle and 3 lines of truth. He is under the rule now, she said, and clipped it into the chart. Derek had been moved from old habit to new weight, not by shouting, but by a square of ink that refused to change its mind. Tiny exhaled once. Razor allowed his pretend nap a full breath. Tank let his shoulders lower a fraction and set them there. We keep the schedule, Robert said. We do not make new noise. We let the rule do its work. They kept the schedule. On the half, they returned to the red light and found it generous for a minute. When the hour dragged, Robert gave Sophie small duties, and she completed them with exactness. Count 20 slow breaths. Draw 5 straight lines. Drink 2 paper cups of water. Each task lit a marker on the long road and told her how far they had already gone. A surgeon crossed the lobby with empty hands and shoes that spoke only when asked. He entered the consult room and left the door ajar the way a person does when they will soon call a name. The nurse called upstairs and then looked at Robert. Soon, she said. He did not stand yet. He measured the lobby one more time and let himself consider good news without reaching for it. Sophie added one more tiny symbol to her page. A small box over a small door. She colored it amber with a mix of yellow and the leftover of red. This one means wait, she said. He liked that too. A code made of color and breath and patience. Red busy, amber wait, green try, paper rule. Claire drifted back to check a note and did not interrupt. She glanced at the file tucked under her arm, then at the chart, then at Robert's steady hands. She looked at Sophie's page and smiled once, quick and real, a quiet salute to a small mind-building order against fear. The phone at the desk rang, a polite slice through the hum. The nurse listened, set the handset down, and turned toward them. Consult, she said. Family. Robert rose, and the movement pulled Sophie up without words. She slipped her hand into his and let it anchor both of them. He did not check that his team stood. He knew they did. He knew how they would fill the hallway with presence and not with talk, if talk was not the right tool. He crossed to the consult room door. Martinez stepped out of a side corridor and matched his pace. She looked once toward the glass that led to the garage and then back at him. If he tries a performance here, she said for the 3rd time, the building will do the remembering, and the remembering will not be kind. He will try something, Robert said. We will be ready. Martinez replied. Robert nodded, centered his weight, and carried Sophie across the threshold toward the next sentence, waiting in that bright, exact room. The red light behind them pulsed once like a steady heart. The city and its cameras and its ink and its quiet rules held their line, and he held his. The consult room door waited half open like a breath held between teeth. The nurse pointed them in, then cut her eyes toward the glass mouth of the ramp, as if listening with her back. Robert felt the edges of the moment the way a mechanic feels. The give just before a stubborn bolt turned. Sophie's fingers fit inside his, and anchored them both. Inside, the surgeon set a palm on the table, mask tugged down, voice steady and stripped of decoration. "She is holding no new bleed," he said. "Tighten pain. Watch the night. Come again on the half." He glanced at the custody copy Claire had filed. "The rule is in the room with us." "Thank you," Robert said, exact and spare. He did not bargain for comfort. He arranged his body like a promise and walked Sophie back into the lobby's bright hum. The nurse lifted her chin a degree. "Stay off the ramp for a moment," she said, moving heat without spreading it. "Security has chatter. The cameras will tell us if it is smoke or fire." Detective Martinez stepped from a side corridor. Yacket sipped, ready that did not rattle. "The car is at the mouth of the ramp," she said. "If he shows, he meets the rule before he meets anyone else." She tapped the laminated grid, as if testing that plastic still held angles in place. "Ramp mouth, east stair landing, third level pillars. We already own these pictures." "He will try something," Robert said, "not as prediction but as weather. We will be ready." Martinez answered. Sophie climbed into their bright chair and taped down her newest drawing. "Red means busy," she said, tapping the small square above a drawn door. "Green means try." She shaded an amber dot between them. "Amber means wait without breaking." She pressed the tape flat with the heel of her small hand, setting a seal. The hospital settled like a huge animal awake at rest. Behind glass, the nurse wrote 2 lines and underlined the hour. The janitor drew a clean stripe of floor and watched it dry. Tiny squared the folder again. Razor read the elevator in a dark pane without turning his head. Tank flexed a hand once and became still. The radio cracked and then obeyed. Garage unit to lobby. Measured voice. Black sedan at the ramp. Driver agitated, talking at the air. Plate noted. Cameras have him at the mouth. Security approaching at a distance. He is pacing. Martinez did not hurry and did not waste time. "Keep them behind that door," she told the nurse, meaning the consult room. Then to Robert, voice like a torque number, "You do not overrun. You are not a shield. You are a guardian. Those jobs are different. Let me and my badge take the first picture." Robert inclined his head because respect is a tool. He looked at Tiny and Razor and Tank and did not need to speak. They shifted the room by a degree without moving far. They narrowed the aisle for nonsense and left the consult room door open enough for air and closed enough for safety. Sophie touched her amber dot. "Wait without breaking," she said, almost to herself. Another radio voice layered over the first. "Service confirmed earlier this hour. Order in Hunt. Copy in chart. Body cams live. All eyes recording." The nurse met Robert's gaze and placed the sentence that would be the chapter's spine. "Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed," she said. She did not make it a sermon. She made it a fact. Garage feeds bloomed on the small monitor, grainy squares in a grid. The sedan idled crooked over the line like it was testing whether rules were objects or ideas. Driver door hung open like a bad thought. A thin man paced. Derek. The building, a concrete instrument, began to play him. Lenses drank every angle without mercy. Light betrayed him off glass and hood and floor. Reflections, hiring reflections. Architecture, turning witness against him. Robert did not lean toward the screen. He had memorized the grid. He watched the lobby itself. The space he owned, because the space would tell him when pictures were about to step into his air. He felt his hands want to close and chose not to let them. Ride the light and do not let it inside your grip. On the screens, Derek threw his arms at no one, then pulled them into a smile that did not belong to his eyes. Security spoke from distance. The camera held to him with indifferent precision. He reached toward a pocket and thought better of it. He shook his head like the world had wronged him again, and he alone had the news. Garage to detective. The voice said, subject served, refusing to leave, says family only, says apology, says he will walk up if we make him wait. Family only lived in the air for 1 second and turned hard. Martinez pressed the transmit. Copy. Keep distance. Do not chase him into the blind stare. If he moves, let the cameras walk him. The building will do the remembering, and the remembering will not be kind. The elevator chimed, a polite sound that did not match what tried to use it. It did not open. A crash bar boomed from the far end. Derek had found the east stairs and climbed fast enough to turn his face a wrong red. He pushed in, too pleased to see all the light and space. Martinez lifted her palm. Security? Step back. She left the first 10 seconds for microphones and lenses to settle into their places. The hall was a stage, and the quiet wrote the script. Derek found Robert and pointed his mouth. You cannot keep me from her forever. 1 step. 2. He aimed his gaze at Sophie and solved aloud the wrong problem. There you are, he said, as if discovery made a thing true. Robert moved the way. Calm men move. When small is the right size, he set his body as a line that blocked the sight the man wanted. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. He let the rules speak first. You are under order, he said. You are violating it. Derek laughed. Paper is not a wall. You think you can print the world into how you want it. Tiny set his toe to a seam in the tile that meant, give space, take risk away. Razor did not blink. Tank's breathing went longer, not shorter. Martinez took the step that made the hallway hers. Sir, you were served. Step back and exit. Your words do not move the order. Derek flickered. The performance hit a rule. He darted a glance to the stair door as if he had hidden a smarter idea there. He raised both hands, and the left hand was not empty. Metal took light and gave it back. Gun, Martinez said, voice level as weather. Security split to pillars. Cameras pinned angles like butterflies. Derek pointed the gun at the room like a child with a stick, meaning more than he could control. He swung left and right and shouted words that would look worse in transcript. The barrel drew a line toward a bright chair and taped pages that said, red means busy and green means try. Sophie moved by instinct and love. She stepped from behind Robert toward the drawings, as if they needed guarding. Robert moved without asking his shoulder or his knee. He stepped into the line and set his back to her and his front to the barrel. Do not, he said, a command, not a plea. Derek squeezed to prove the world still bent for him. The hallway cracked like ice. Heat bit leather and found muscle near the shoulder, hot and blunt. The force spun him a fraction, but he did not fall. He held the line. A wall built of quiet decisions that cost what they cost. Sophie's small hands pressed against his back like a second spine. I am here, she said, breath breaking on the words. Martinez drew steel from the sheath of training. She did not fire into a hospital. She sent orders like bolts to the right threads. Down, for those who needed it. Drop it, for the only one who would not. Security flanked as drawn on the map. Tiny stepped into a seam and narrowed the world. Razor slid without sound and turned leverage into language. Forearm striking wrist at the right moment in the right direction. The gun clattered, spun under a chair, and stopped, as if relieved to be done with work it had never wanted. Radios clipped the air with the alphabet of people who intend to end nights correctly. Martinez had Derek face to tile. Cuffs on, body cam, making his words permanent. You are under arrest for violating a protective order, for assault with a deadly weapon, for discharge of a firearm in a hospital. You will be searched. You will be transported. Anything you say knows you said it. Derek tried to raise his head and found floor. He spat a story about love and apology that tasted stale the second it left his mouth. The microphones took it and did not care. Bafflement, the last trick of men who thought the world would never learn to spell no. The nurse was already at Robert's side with a kit that lived under the desk for nights like this. She cut leather clean without tearing a child loose, and stacked gauze in a press that taught Red to obey. "Hold pressure," she said, and he did, because he understands instruction. She handed a clear bag to security. "Seal the weapon." Gloves lifted metal by the cool parts. Label weighted. Initials. Time. Location. The chain took its first link in front of Sophie's rules. Tiny crouched and plucked the spent casing with tweezers into a little cup. Patience, making the action respectable. Razor found the nick in a chair leg and rested a finger near it without touching, marking a witness that would not forget. Tank stood in the east doorway and breathed like a man who had been asked to move a mountain and decided a pillar would do. Sophie came around to see Robert's face. Her eyes were too wide and too steady. He bent, pain, a measured heat, and set his forehead to hers. "Just a scratch," he said, not because it was fact, but because truth has more than one job. "We stayed where we needed to." She nodded once and reached for the green crayon with a hand that trembled and went on anyway. "Green means, try now," he said, moving the last lock into place. She put wax to paper and drew a line under the green, the mark a little shaky and stubborn enough to count. Uniforms pressed to the threshold and stopped when the nurse raised a palm. "Family only." The rule bowed to triage. Two officers lifted Derek and took him out. A camera caught the look on his face when paper outweighed him. Not rage, not triumph, confusion at the simple weight of no. The nurse set a sticker on Robert's bandage. With the hour pressure started, a small label that would be a serious line later. Security sealed the bag and wrote the time clean. Martinez checked her lens, checked her notes, checked the path from gun to cuff to door. The building's cameras hummed and stored. The laminated map on the counter was suddenly a diary. The radio gave the hallway one more sentence. "Subject in custody. Transported. No injuries to staff. Evidence secured. Cámaras archivadas." The clerk wrote the time and the letters. The nurse underlined them once as if ink could be extra true. The red eye over intensive pulsed and steadied. Behind it, machines kept up their slow rescue. The janitor made a fresh, clean stripe where the casing had been, and the line felt like a small ceremony that belonged to the room. Martinez crouched to Sophie's height, badge and eyes level. "The building remembered for us," she said. "You drew the rules and we followed them. That is what winning looks like on nights like this." Robert let 1 degree of heat leave his shoulders and no more. Payne sat in a chair and kept quiet. He looked at the clear bag where the gun lived like a specimen no one wished to see again. He looked at the empty space Derek had occupied and found the air easier to breathe. The nurse's voice returned to the river she kept for normal. "On the half," she said to Robert, quiet as before. "Family only." She looked at the bandage and then at the child. "Rules are still making space. Keep obeying them, and we will keep opening doors." Robert met Martinez's. "He will try again," he said, not as fear, but as whether. "We will be ready," she said. Body cam. A small, square heartbeat on her chest, and in the bright hum of the hospital, with cameras awake and ink drying, and a child drawing lines that turned into law, the night shifted from chaos into a plan that would hold. Morning did not arrive so much as thin itself into the fluorescent light that had patrolled the hours. The lobby kept breathing. The red eye over intensive care pulsed and held. Coffee surrendered and turned bitter. Robert stayed in the same chair and made the quiet adjustments a man makes to keep a machine from rattling. He listened. He shifted a shoulder. He let pain occupy a seat inside him and kept it from voting. The bandage under his clean shirt had learned to behave. A small sticker on the gauze recorded when pressure began, and when it stopped, ink that would later stand up in a room where clocks are witnesses. He allowed that thought to pass, and then let it rest. He did not live in the future. He lived inside the step he could place with accuracy now. Sophie slept in their bright plastic house with his jacket under her head, 2 fingers still caught in the fold of leather like a receipt you keep until the warranty refuses to argue. Her drawings had become a wall of rules, a red square above a door, a green underline that said, "Try and mean it," an amber dot that said, "Wait without breaking," a small square over the consult room door, a tiny circle for sleep. She had drawn a stair door and stitched it closed with crosshatch. She had drawn a ladder to good air. The hospital was a city on paper now, and the city obeyed her. Tiny squared the custody order again until the edges sat like teeth on a gear, then set the folder beneath the plastic lip of the registration desk where it could not wander. Razor leaned against his column and read the elevator in the dark pane without turning his head. Tank stood at the east stair with the easy breath of a foundation. The team looked like a plan that could hold. Detective Martinez returned with a face that carried news without spilling any. She spoke to the nurse, to security, then to Robert. "Chain intact," she said. "Body cam footage backed up. Garage feeds archived. The casing logged. The chair leg nick photographed with scale. He is booked, no release. The charges respect what he did to this building." Robert nodded once. He did not say good. He felt the weight shift an inch toward the right side of the scale and let it stay there. The nurse slid a form into the chart, and the chart swallowed it with the soft sound of paper finding where it belongs. The rule had grown heavier, not because anyone raised a voice, but because ink had learned new corners to hold. He had no speech that could loosen it, Martinez said quietly. He had no swagger that could throw it off. The building will do the remembering, and the remembering will not be kind to him. Robert looked at the consult door and did not guess. He looked at Sophie's wall and let himself recognize what had changed. She was not drawing fear. She was drawing law. The child had replaced panic with procedure and called it art. Repetition is a kind of armor, he thought, and felt the phrase fit the room like a bolt seated to spec. Sophie woke, like small people wake when a room is honest. She touched his chest first, then touched the page, then checked the nurse with her eyes. The nurse lifted her chin in the precise way that stands in for a full sentence. On the half, she said, "We will keep it short and quiet." Sophie nodded and chose a new green Claire had found for her at dawn. "This one means try and mean it," she said, and underlined yesterday's line, to teach the paper the difference. Food arrived, wrapped and apologetic. Tiny nudged the bag with a boot. Razor tore a sandwich and divided it as clean as a scale. Tank accepted his share like a charge. Robert ate without grease. Fuel, not comfort. Sophie took 2 measured swallows of juice, set the bottle where it could not topple, and returned to the work of drawing order. Claire appeared with the file grown thicker and a kindness that did not announce itself. "The judge has reviewed the update," she said. "Custody holds. The note is logged, with hour and name." She crouched to Sophie's eye level. "Do you need any tools for today's job?" "Tape," Sophie said, "and a different green. The other one feels tired." Claire produced both, as if the request were a door she had been hoping to open. Sophie tested the color and smiled a little at its courage. Martinez set a laminated camera map on the counter and tapped 3 squares with 1 knuckle. "These angles made a case while we breathed, she said. If he tries a new story later, the building will interrupt him in the same 3 languages. Image, time, sound, he will try again. Robert said, weather, not dread. We will be ready, Martinez replied, and the repetition made the sentence stronger, not dull. Repetition is a kind of armor, Robert thought again, and felt it settle into the morning. The nurse lifted her chin. The half is here. 1 guardian, 1 child, no touching the lines, no leaning on rails. Her voice was the river, steady and exact. Robert rose. He let Sophie's hand hook his center of gravity, and the pain obeyed the rule he had written for it. Right along. Do not steer. They walked the corridor that had become a metronome. Doors sighed. Air moved. The red eye dimmed and the doors met their duty. Inside, machines stood like careful animals doing necessary work. Jennifer lay under tape and dressing and measured mercy. The monitor wrote Green Mountains with a steadiness that a human could learn from. Sophie put her palm to Robert's chest and whispered the single word that made them honest. Mama. Not plea, report. The nurse watched and did not speak, as if language might shift a number by accident. Jennifer's eyelids stirred once like a wind across a page. They stilled, then stirred again. Robert did not advance. He let a held degree of heat leave his shoulders. He allowed hope to be a discipline, not a leap. The nurse lifted a hand. Time. Sophie touched the edge of the sheet with a fingertip that did not disturb a line or a wound, then stepped back because rules are a fence that keeps kindness standing. They left when the rule said leave, not when their wants suggested otherwise. In the lobby, a rumor tried to grow a mouth, the way rumors do when rooms have had a night. It rounded off its edges against the tile and rehearsed wrong versions of events. Robert ignored it. Rumor has no handle. He turned to objects that do. Security brought a tray with the sealed weapon, the tiny cup holding the casing, and printed stills from the ramp and the stair and the pillars, signed for transfer to the vault. The officer said the pen had been forced to earn its keep and seemed proud to be asked again. Robert read, signed, wrote the hour. The officer initialed, stamped, and aligned the stamp with the corner, as if corners can be talked into honesty by neatness. Ink set, time fixed. The doorway opened in one direction only. Sophie added a small shield in the corner of her page, a shape like a leaf. This means we do not make new noise, she said. He nodded. We do not make new noise. He repeated, we keep the schedule. We let the rule do the work it promised. Razor checked the dark pane and adjusted his lean by a hair. Tank moved weight from one foot to the other to share the load with the floor. Tiny polished the plastic of his temporary badge on his sleeve and made it clear again, then let it hang. Every small surface a person trusted should be readable. Martinez leaned on the counter with elbows that did not believe in sloppiness. The prosecutor will love your map, she told Sophie. We keep notes like that too. She turned to Robert. When the afternoon turns, I will rotate the car at the ramp. I will tuck a copy of the camera map where the nurse keeps extra bracelets. If he tries to author the night again, the building will edit. The nurse came out with a form, consent for a minor to accompany a guardian in intensive care during intermittent hours. Robert signed. He wrote the time. The nurse slid the page into the chart and repeated the sentence that had become the chapter's spine. Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed. Sophie underlined the meaning on her page, even though the page held no text, only color and doors. A volunteer rolled a basket of small toys to the desk and left it there without asking anyone anything. A resident touched the counter without looking, a habit that marked a lap. The janitor drew one more clean stripe where the casing had been and paused to admire the shine. The radio spoke a string of letters that meant ordinary. The building relaxed into its memory. Claire returned with a plain bag. "Fresh shirt," she said. The nurse helped lift the cotton over the bandage with care, as if respecting the wound were a kind of testimony. Sophie smoothed the seam over his shoulder, like sealing a promise. He wore the truth under cloth. He did not hide it. He did not perform it. Robert looked at Sophie's wall again, and let himself read the transformation out loud for her and for himself. "You are drawing law now, not fear," he said. She considered that, and then added a small ladder, rung with the new green, steadier than the last. "Green means try," she said, and she did. The nurse tipped her chin toward the clock. "On the half, again." Short and quiet. He nodded. "We will bring calm," he said. "We have it on a schedule." The sentence felt like a vow and like a plan. Both. They made the pilgrimage again and returned to the bright square that had become a house. The file lived under glass. The stamp marks kept their corners down. The camera map waited under plastic like a diagram of a victory already earned. Repetition worked its old magic. Repetition turned chance into proof. Repetition is a kind of armor. Martinez looked once more toward the glass and then toward the team. "I am rotating the car," she said. "I am copying the camera map to the safe drawer. If he tries a new story, the building will be less patient than I am." She pushed off the counter, and the quiet made way for her without needing to be asked. Robert watched her go and felt the room accept the promise she left behind. He set his palm beside Sophie's page. She set her small hand over his. Together their hands covered red and green and amber, and the strange fourth color she had invented for the door that opens because people have behaved. The weight of their hands was not heavy. It was exact. He looked at the consult door and refused to guess. He looked at the clock and accepted its circle. He looked at the nurse and saw a rule that dared to be kind. He looked at the glass and saw a city with hands. He breathed once, slow and even, and the lobby breathed with him. And the chapter ended with preparation, not luck, carrying them forward. Morning broadened into a cooler light that did not argue. The courthouse had finished its work of stamps and custody, and the city opened a second room, where pictures would do the talking, and people would learn whether they believed their eyes. Claire arrived with a clipped page and a steady tone. "A public session," she said. "Oversight hall, evidence screens, short and exact." She looked at Sophie. "The room is safe. The rules will hold." Robert listened the way he reads a torque chart. He let the information sit with the good tools. "We will bring calm," he said. "We have it on a schedule." The nurse wrote the hour they would be out and underlined it once, as if ink could be extra true. "Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed," she said, and handed him the copy. The chamber smelled like paper that plans to live forever. Marble held its own weather. A red diode above the clerk pulsed like the small eye in intensive care, a patient signal that meant busy. Board members settled along a long table that pretended to be a single thought. Old power wore confidence in its shoulders and looked for places to lean. New power arrived with a folder, a clean shirt, a quiet girl's drawings, and a bandage that did not ask for attention. Andre stood at the center lectern with the kind of stillness that makes noise notice itself. His tie was the color of unspoken rules. He did not smile. He set a slim platinum card on the wood, face down, and left it there. A challenge and a parable. The card made no sound and drew every eye. He let the silence settle until the room understood what was being weighed. Detective Martinez took the first slot. She did not warm the crowd. She warmed the chain of custody. She stated it the way a mechanic names parts: weapons secured with gloves and bag, label with time and location and initials fixed, spent casing recovered with tweezers, placed in a cup, labeled the same, body cam recordings copied to server, garage cameras archived, order served, arrest made. No injuries to staff. Evidence transferred to vault with signatures. Repetition is a kind of armor, she said, and the sentence fitted the chamber like a bolt to spec. The screens woke. On the left, a quiet grid of time codes. On the right, a pane of stills, and the first chart, incident intake by source. The bars stood tall for private complaints and flat for official channels. The legend told on itself. Anonymous reports rose. Direct staff. Notes dipped. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. Martinez pointed once, and the first clip ran. The ramp mouth. The crooked sedan. The patient camera. Voices that sounded smaller when a building remembered. Then the east stair door. Then the hallway and the bright square, where a child's rules fluttered on tape. The muzzle climbed, the shot cracked. Robert turned a fraction and did not fall. The lobby moved, like a drill practiced with respect. The gun spun under a chair and stopped, as if relieved to rest. The cuffs clicked. A voice tried apology and tasted its own stale. A director cleared his throat. Tone, he began, and the words skittered across marble and died. Andre lifted one palm. We are not punishing anyone, he said, without heat. We are removing a blind spot. He did not look at Derek's empty chair. He looked at the screens as if they were a mirror that could not flatter. The second chart rose. Resolution time by passenger status. The bars for ordinary complaints dragged like anchors. The bars for preferred status leapt ahead, as if time belonged to them. The axes did not lie, and neither did the caption. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. Andre took the clicker from the clerk like a scalpel and moved the evidence through its own story. On screen, a timeline appeared. A narrow river with stones marked by hands and hours. 10:21:37 J. Parker, he said, letting the time and the signature become a quiet refrain. He tapped the next stone. 10:21:39 J. Parker. The seal on the evidence bag. 10:22 even J. Parker. The vault transfer stamp. He spoke them the way a surgeon calls instruments. 10:21:37 J. Parker. 10:21:39 J. Parker. 10:22 even J. Parker. Repetition is a kind of armor. Robert stood to one side with Sophie on a front bench, her pad open, her new green steady. When the ramp clip ended, she drew a rectangle for the screen and a small black bar beneath it for the captions that did not blink. She added a narrow ladder at the edge. This is for reaching the good air, she whispered, as if the room needed a map out even when it was not on fire. A hand at the far end of the table rose, the kind of hand that announces legacy contributions and wants interest paid. A senior member leaned into the microphone to offer caution wrapped as experience. Perhaps we are letting a single night write too much policy, he said. The room shifted, the way a floor shifts under a sudden load. Andre did not change temperature. He touched the platinum card once with a fingertip, as if to remind it who owned whom. The card remained face down. We are not punishing anyone, he repeated. We are removing a blind spot. He turned his head to Robert without turning his stance. You ask what this change will do, he said. Not a challenge, an invitation. Robert answered with the only currency he was willing to spend. It will keep the door small for nonsense, he said. It will let people do their job. The next slide did not show violence. It showed the board itself in the mirror of data, complaint disposition by language, final outcomes by neighborhood, the hard edge of slow for those without status, the soft edge of fast for the few. The titles spoke in simple words. The color blocks accused in a tone no one could call dramatic. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. Martinez returned to the microphone and read the exact phrases the building had recorded the night before. He said, "Welcome or else." The transcript read. He said, "Apology as theater," then raised a gun. He said, "Love," then made a threat. The speaker was a neutral witness and an unflattering friend. A director tried to cut in and found nothing to grip. The building will do the remembering, and the remembering will not be kind to him, Martinez said, and the sentence did not need to be new to be true. Claire laid 2 pages on the side table with clean wrists. Hospital visitation logs, custody confirmation. The small sticker from a bandage with the hour pressure started, and the hour it stopped, 10:21:37 J. Parker. Andres said again, placing the time where the room could not move it. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. A vice president near the center cleared his throat once, a small sound that announced a choice. He was the sort of executive who could float above work until a wind asked him to land. He did not look to the chair where old Power had sat, a chair with a suit coat thrown over its back like a flag out of privilege. He looked at the room that would have to live with itself after people went home. "I will take the implementation lead," he said. The words altered the air. A hand that had practiced the easy thing reached for the hard thing instead. Andre nodded without show. "Implementation will be measured," he said, "not in press releases, in receipts, new script at the door, documented training. A clock in the complaint room, a real audit with teeth." The platinum card stayed face down. He did not need to flip it to prove anything. Robert raised a hand, not for permission, but for clarity. He did not speak long. "The greeting will change today," he said. "Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen." He did not look at cameras. He looked at desks and chairs and the people who would have to carry words in their mouths and mean them. Sophie finished her drawing and held it up. The board saw a child's version of their chamber turned into law. A red square above the clerk light. A green underline at the bottom, labeled by a hand that did not write letters but knew what words should feel like. The small leaf shield in the corner that meant "do not make new noise." Andre looked at it and let the picture decide his face. Old Power tried one last time. "Soft and careful. This is all very fast," said the senior member. "Our donors will want to be briefed. Our partners will expect input." He said partner, the way a person says obstacle. Andre did not sigh. He kept the room inside the shape it had earned. "Our partners may bring questions," he said. "Our answers are made of time and paper." 10:21:37 J. Parker. 10:21:39 J. Parker. 10:22 even J. Parker. The building remembers. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. The chair gavelled out of habit and discovered it was not needed. The clerk stamped minutes that would outlive every person in the room. A staffer rolled a cart of binders to the side and locked a drawer with a soft click. Thomas, the vice president, who had claimed the work, lifted his copy and nodded as if weight belonged in a hand. In the lobby outside, marble swallowed the voices that wanted to grow teeth. Martinez raised a palm and turned microphones into neutral furniture. "The case will speak in filings," she said. "The system is doing the remembering." She let the sentence end there and did not decorate it. Robert walked Sophie toward the door. Claire fell in beside them with the file. Tiny and Razor and Tank took up their places around the edges, the way a frame takes its duty from the picture. The cruiser waited at the curb like a promise kept. On the steps, Thomas caught up, tie loosened by a single notch that meant decision, not mess. He faced the hallway as if speaking to the air could teach it a new habit. "The greeting will change today," he said again so the walls could learn. "Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen." The words were not branding, they were a receipt. Andre returned his platinum card to his pocket without looking at it. He left the lectern as he had come, with nothing but stillness and a plan. The room behind him adjusted its center of gravity by a degree toward proof. By the time they reached the hospital, the red eye in intensive care pulsed and then dimmed. The nurse lifted her chin. On the half, she said, short and quiet. She glanced at the chart and saw the court note already landed, a rectangle of ink that closed a loop. Sophie set her new drawing on the back of their bright chair, a record beside the records, then underlined green one more time and added a rung to the ladder toward good air. Robert rested his palm beside hers and felt the exact weight of two hands cover a square of paper that had turned fear into law. He centered his breath. He led her down the corridor that had become a metronome for mercy, toward a door that opened because people had behaved, while somewhere across the city, a vice president opened a binder and began the work he had chosen. We listen, Thomas had said. The line would have to be proved, not said. Repetition would be the armor. Ink would be the law. Afternoon slipped into the hospital like a careful hand, and the building kept its steady hum while the city outside began to wear its new script. Robert stood near the entrance where the greeting sign faced both directions, inward to staff, outward to the people who needed them, and he watched the letters sit like a tool you could trust. Payne rode quiet under his clean shirt and did not get a vote. Sophie rested her sketchpad on the arm of the bright chair and underlined the green again. The line steady now, the way a good habit holds. The hour turned. The visit was short and quiet, and when they returned to the lobby, Claire was waiting with a small envelope and a smile that did not perform. The courthouse clerk sent this, she said, paper that says yesterday is done and tomorrow is allowed. She did not open it. Paper is better when it is opened by the right hands in the right room. The right room, today, was not a court. It was the back lot behind the Iron Horse, the kind of place where grills had smoked on long weekends and where, after dark, engines had cooled while men told the sort of jokes that do not survive the morning. Now it wore strings of simple lights and a chalk line that made a narrow aisle. Neighbors drifted in along the fence. Mothers with strollers, a mail carrier in his off-duty cap, two grandmothers with folding chairs, and a good handful of kids whose feet knew better than to scuff the chalk. The gate agent from across the street waved from the curb. The mechanic from the next bay set a cooler in the shade and pressed the lid once like a seal. Jennifer could not come. The rules had her in the care of the machine, and the machines were doing their job. But the nurse had written a short note with the exact hour and tucked it into Claire's pocket. "Read it when it matters," she had said, and underlined the minute in blue. Andre arrived without entourage, as always, stillness working like a quiet engine. Detective Martinez leaned on the fence post with a stance that meant ready without noise. Thomas slipped through the gate with a clipboard under his arm, checked the greeting that hung by the back door, and let the smallest satisfaction show, "Welcome aboard. We listen." The letters looked right, even here, far from marble and badged glass. At the center of the chalk aisle stood a folding table cleaned within an inch of ceremony. On it waited a notebook with a cloth cover, a small inkwell, and a square wooden stamp, borrowed from the community library. Liam touched the stamp with 2 fingers, as one touches a useful relic, then set it back on its base with care. "We stamp what we keep," he said, not as a boast, but as a rule that had proved itself. Nora stood to his left in a simple dress the color of good paper, hair tied back like someone who had come to work as well as to love. She looked at the neighbors, and then at the kids, and then at the table. The way a person looks at a bridge they intend to cross. Robert took a place off to the side, close enough to witness and far enough not to crowd the vow. Sophie slid along the bench and sat very straight with her pad on her knees. Tiny stood near the cooler like a silent usher. Razor watched the alley mouth in the reflection of a dusty window. Tank held the gate with his presence and nothing more. Claire opened the envelope and read the clerk's line to herself, and then aloud to the small square of air that mattered. Papers recorded. The note said, "All names correct. No holds." She set the sheet beside the notebook and turned it so the signatures faced the couple like a quiet witness. Andre did not take a stage. He lifted his voice just enough for the fence to hear. "We do not need a court today," he said. "We need a record." He looked at the table. "We have one." He looked at the people. "We have many." He raised a palm toward Liam and Nora, and then lowered it. "This is not a blessing from power. This is a promise that power will remember." Liam began, not with flourish, but with the sort of sentence that holds when night leans hard. "I promise to tell the truth when I am scared, and to sit when sitting is the work." He did not look past Nora to see who approved. He looked at her face, and at the stamp, and at the inkwell, and spoke like a mechanic, naming parts he would trust to carry weight. Nora answered with a breath that sounded like the start of good weather. "I promise to carry with you and to rest with you, and to call a plan and not a debt." Her voice did not shake. It was the voice of someone who had learned the difference between performance and procedure. A child laughed down near the fence because a toddler had dropped a plastic cup and a puppy had stolen it. The laugh did not break the moment. It joined it. Martinez let her eyes soften by a degree, and then set them back to ready. Claire lifted the notebook to the light, turned to a fresh page, and steadied it with one hand while the other set the inkwell straight. Liam reached for the pen, then paused. He glanced at the stamp, and then at the people who had come. "The library keeps its promises," he said. "We stamp what we keep." Nora nodded. He dipped the pen, signed his name with letters large and legible enough to survive bad lighting and long years. Nora took the pen and signed with the same care. As if signatures make intentions behave, Claire wrote the hour in the margin, the exact words the nurse had underlined, and drew a short line under the names to anchor them. Liam lifted the stamp, let the wood sit in his palm like a prayer that does not announce itself, set it in the ink, and pressed it down clean. The mark landed square and dark, a rectangle that said the page had joined something larger than itself. He turned the stamp and offered it to Nora. She pressed it beside his, a twin seal, and the two marks looked like the little red squares Sophie drew above her doors, only darker and meant for keeping. "We stamp what we keep," Liam said again, softer now, almost to himself. Nora smiled without show. "We keep this." Andra did not clap first. The kids did. Then the neighbors, then the fence line, then the crew. The sound was not stadium loud. It was clean and right. Cheers rose in pockets, the way steam rises when a kitchen does work well. The gate agent wiped at her eyes and pretended she had dust. The mail carrier, who had seen 1,000 doors opened and closed on hard mornings, let out a small whoop that made the little ones grin. Martinez did not cheer, but she nodded once, and anyone who knew her eyes would have called it approval. Thomas looked at the notebook and at the stamp and at the people and at the sign on the back door, and took one quiet breath, like a man setting a tool into its drawer after use. Robert felt the applause run through the small bones of the lot and land in his shoulder, as a warmth the bandage could not object to. Sophie tapped the edge of her pad and added a tiny stamp to her drawing, a square with a shadow that meant permanent. When the clapping eased, Claire read the nurse's note. Just one line, written in that careful hand. Stable, it said, holding. She has begun to breathe more on her own. The cheer that rose then was different. It was the sound a town makes when a bridge has held in the flood. It was relief turned into air. Robert closed his eyes for the length of one slow count and opened them on purpose. He did not make a speech. He looked at Liam and Nora and let his head tip a little in the language he used when torque was true. Sophie slid off the bench, walked to the table, and set her drawing beside the ledger. Red means busy. Green means try. Amber means wait without breaking. A small ladder toward the good air. A new square for the stamp. Nora bent to see and let out a breath that sounded like thanks without cost. Liam pressed 2 fingers to the corner of the page and then lifted them like a seal. Neighbors drifted forward in a line that formed itself, not to gawk, but to witness. Each wrote a name in the margin, small and tidy, the way you sign a receipt you intend to keep. No speeches, just names. When the pen ran light, Tiny produced another from a pocket, as if the moment had requisitioned him. Razor set the notebook edges flush when hands bumped them. Tank straightened the table when the little ones leaned too earnestly. Andre stood back and let the scene arrange itself. Old Power would have found a microphone. New Power let paper do the remembering. He touched the stamp's wooden handle once, then put his hand in his pocket and left it there. As the last neighbor signed, Nora reached for the whiteboard, propped against the wall, the one the shop used to map jobs and delivery times, and who had the key to the parts cage. She erased 2 smudged notes with the side of her hand, and wrote in simple block letters across the top, not to make it grand, but to make it plain. Family rules. She drew 3 short lines and spoke as she wrote, as if teaching her own mouth the shape of the promise. Tell the truth when scared. Sit when sitting is the work. Carry and rest. Call a plan. A plan. Liam took the marker and underlined each line once, the way a clerk underlines an hour that matters. Claire slid the ledger under their hands. Sign the bottom, she said, because signatures make intentions behave. They did. Claire added the day and the place and her own small letters as witness, because this kind of page is stronger when a second hand holds it down. The light over the back lot softened. A breeze moved the string of bulbs and made the glass sing a little. The tiniest applause. Kids chased each other to the end of the fence and back. A neighbor stacked chairs without being asked. The mail carrier returned the cup the puppy had stolen and saluted him anyway. Robert looked at the whiteboard and the ledger and the little square stamp mark, and let the feeling come that he had kept at the edge all afternoon. It was not triumph. It was something quieter and heavier, a kind of completion that does not arrive with trumpets. Procedure had carried them to a door. Love had stepped through and logged the hour. He turned to go because the day was not done. Tomorrow would need a list. He and Sophie would need to write it. Nora capped the marker and wiped her palms on her dress, like a worker putting away tools. Liam lifted the stamp from the base and set it in a small cloth bag. He tied the string and handed the bag to Claire for the library with a sentence that made the children look up as if they had just learned a new trick for breathing. We stamp what we keep. Neighbors clapped one more time, softer now, the way people clap when a baby has gone to sleep in the next room. Cheers rose and fell like the tide. Martinez glanced toward the alley and nodded at nothing in particular and everything at once. Thomas checked the time and wrote it in the small square on his clipboard beside a line that read, "Greeting script deployed." Andre looked at the board and at the ledger and at the faces and let a rare line of humor cross his mouth. "Good design," he said, and meant the vowels as much as the marker lines. Sophie tugged Robert's sleeve. "Do we write it down at home?" she asked. He knew what she meant. The whiteboard in the kitchen, the little notebook on the shelf by the door, the place where groceries and chores had always elbowed out the big things. "We will," he said. "Tonight, under the lamp." We will write it and sign the bottom, because signatures make intentions behave. They walked back through the gate while the lot folded itself away. Tiny shouldered the table. Razor gathered the pens. Tank let the hinges close without a sound. The street wore ordinary again, but a better ordinary, one with receipts. At home, later, the lamp would build its small circle over the kitchen table. Sophie would draw her squares in the corner of the board. Robert would print the family rules in letters even a tired eye could read. Truth when scared, sit when sitting is the work. Carry and rest. Call a plan, a plan. Then they would sign the bottom. His name? Her name with the little heart she sometimes hides in the stroke. Space left for one more hand. When Jennifer could lift a pen, the ledger of their house would match the ledger in the yard, and both would match the city's new habit. For now, the nurse's note waited in Claire's pocket like a kept promise. The hospital's red eye pulsed and would soon dim. The greeting at the back door faced both ways and did not tire. And in a quiet kitchen, a blank whiteboard leaned against a wall, ready to hold words that would keep until morning. Morning entered like a careful clerk opening drawers without scrape. The house took the light and made it useful. In the kitchen, the whiteboard leaned beside the little lamp that knew how to build a circle of certainty. Robert set a folded cloth beneath the board, as if it were a polished part that should not scuff, then uncapped a marker with the quiet of someone who has learned that noise is not proof. Sophie climbed onto the chair on both knees and steadied the upper corner with her palm. Her chosen green lay ready, the color that meant try and mean it. Robert printed with the hand he used for labels and torque numbers, letters large and legible enough to survive tired eyes. Family rule, he wrote, tell the truth when scared. Sit when sitting is the work. Carry and rest. Call a plan, a plan. He signed the bottom because signatures make intentions behave, then passed the marker to Sophie. She drew a small leaf shield in the lower corner that meant do not make new noise, and added a small ladder for the breath to reach the good air. The cap went on with an exact click, and the board held. Claire had sent a simple line at dawn from the hospital desk in a hand that does not oversell hope. The unit will call when the hour turns. If the surgeon is satisfied, we will test what comes next. Robert read it twice, and let hope behave like procedure. He looped the lamp cord, wiped the table, and set the folder in the place where important small things live. The house felt ready. The way a tool feels ready when you have cleaned it and set it where your hand will find it in the dark. A knock came with no hurry in it. Tiny opened the door like a professional who respects hinges. Razor stood behind him with 2 thermoses and the look of a man who has already checked the alley. Tank leaned on the jamb so quietly the wood seemed grateful. Detective Martinez lifted a palm at the threshold, and the hallway learned courtesy. We keep the angles honest today, she said. The car sits at the mouth. The camera map lives in the drawer. The building remembers, and we do not give it extra work. Robert slid the custody copy into the folder with the slow accuracy of a man closing a circuit. Sophie tore off the pages that had done their duty and left them beneath the lamp for her mother to read. When reading drawings would be the better way to hear what the night had changed. The hospital welcomed them with its steady hum. The red light over intensive care pulsed and softened. The nurse lifted her chin in the small gesture that had become a bridge between strangers. On the half, she said, short and quiet. Rules make space for kindness when they are obeyed. She wrote the time on the board and underlined it once, the underline that had been the spine of this new life. They walked the corridor the way a metronome walks a bar of music. Doors breathed, air moved with intention. Inside the room, the machines looked like careful animals waiting to be told which way to point their strength. The surgeon spoke in the voice truth uses when it must carry more than comfort. We have taken what the machines can give and asked them to step back. She is breathing more on her own. We will test the distance, and we will not rush the bridge. Sophie set her hand to Robert's chest and made the word that had kept them honest. Here, it was not plea. It was report and map. The nurse stood in the corner with one hand resting on a line and her eyes on a number, and did not add language where presence was enough. Jennifer's eyelids moved like paper when a small breeze passes through a room that has been shut too long. The motion came and paused and returned. Her mouth made the shape of a question that did not yet need sound. Robert did not add speech to the air. He made his body a steady instrument beside hers. He let his breath be the only sound the room needed to learn from him. The nurse leaned to the child and gave permission with a whisper that felt like a ceremony. Say the rule. Sometimes, a child's code carries where adult grammar stumbles. Sophie lifted her green and traced it in the air. A small exact motion. Green means try. The surgeon nodded as if the phrase were an order. The measured work shifted, and a little more of Jennifer entered the room. The monitor wrote green mountains that rose and fell and held. Jennifer's eyes opened like careful doors. She looked at the nurse and the surgeon, and then at Robert, as if reading a familiar manual, then found Sophie, and let her mouth make the beginning of a smile. The nurse made a sound that no transcript would keep and still call neutral. The surgeon said good in a tone that turned the word into an instrument. Family only. The nurse said again, not to narrow love, but to keep the door the right size. She set a sticker on the chart with a time and pressed it flat. Bandage checks. Breath counts. Cautious steps announced as lines on paper. Each line a plank in a bridge. They left when the rule said leave. The red light woke and did its duty. In the lobby, Martinez waited with that steady patience that knows the difference between action and interruption. The motion for no release had been stamped. She said without drama, the building will keep the rest of the story until the court asks for it. She glanced at the entrance where the greeting faced both directions and had settled into its new skin. The complaint room clock agreed with the nurse board and the desk and the quiet phone. Repetition is a kind of armor. Thomas arrived with the same clipboard and a smudge of ink on his finger that pleased Robert because ink announces labor. First shift trained, second shift scheduled. The greeting is holding and will not be allowed to become a poster that forgets to act. He looked at Sophie as if she were a stakeholder rather than a child, and that was the correct way to treat the owner of a wall of rules. Andre came without the platinum card on display, which meant principal remained principal. He stood where he could see the doorway and the desk and said nothing, the kind of leadership that journeys farther than speech. He gave the nurse the nod. One craft gives another. Paperwork found them like weather that knows which field has earned rain. Claire brought a slim stack that did not overreach. Services, counseling, a stipend for childcare during appointments, clean lines for consent, a path through billing that did not punish survival. Robert read as if reading were a torque spec, and signed where signature anchors a promise. Claire initialed where a second hand makes a line stronger. The nurse pressed a unit seal in the corner, a rectangle of ink that would still be legible when eyes were tired. We stamp what we keep, Claire said, and the sentence threaded back to the ledger under string lights and forward to whatever came next. Home welcomed them at midday for one honest hour. The board on the wall held, "The rules read like a small oath a house could whisper." Robert took the marker and drew a little box beneath the lines and left it blank. Space for one more hand when she can lift a pen. He wrote, and underlined it. Sophie fetched the ledger and opened to the fresh page she had saved. She drew the tiny stamps in the corner and wrote her code again. Red means busy. Amber means wait without breaking. Green means try and mean it. She signed and slid the book to Robert. He signed, and the house felt heavier in the right way. They returned for the next half. The door obeyed. Jennifer was awake in the careful way that demands kindness. The nurse raised a hand for quiet, and got quiet. Robert took her hand. Her fingers answered with just enough, and then a little more. He said the only word that belonged. Here! Sophie stood within the allowed line and did not cross it. She put her palm against her own chest and breathed in time with her mother. Procedure had taught the room how to hold grace. Love followed the instructions. Later, the neighbors drifted by with ordinary kindness, disguised as errands. A casserole came with reheating times, written in plain script. A bag of oranges arrived like a bright argument for endurance. The mail carrier brought a child's postcard drawing of a doorway with a square painted red, and the words "try" later stamped in the heavy hand of small effort. Robert placed it on the refrigerator where policy belongs in kitchens. Thomas checked in without hovering. He had added a second line to the greeting at the bottom, because words become truer when they are said twice with intention. We listen, we mean it. He showed it without ceremony and then went back to the work that would make the line behave. Andre stood for a minute in a corner where the light did kind work for faces. Then went where rules are written when nobody is watching. By late afternoon, the unit called again. The red light softened. The door gave. Jennifer tried the world and found a word. Name, she said, and Sophie gave it to her. The nurse looked down so the first look between mother and child could be owned by the people it belonged to. Rules can be generous when people obey them. They left when told, because leaving on time is part of keeping a door open for the next time. In the corridor, the clock made its patient circle. The sign faced both ways and did not tire. A trainee rehearsed the greeting under breath and corrected their posture when they heard the second line fit the first. Welcome aboard. Please tell us if anything concerns you. We listen. We mean it. Evening drew a line of light under the office and let it slide along the floorboards and fade against the baseboard without needing applause. It was enough that it held. The janitor drew one last stripe of clean and let it shine. The volunteer rolled a cart of books no one would open, and everyone liked to see because order is a kindness. Tiny leaned his shoulder to the entrance and listened to the hinge. Razor read the elevator in a dark pane and found quiet. Tank stood where the corridor narrows and lent the place his breath. Claire arrived with a slim envelope from the unit desk. Inside lay a copy of the nurse note from the first breath without help. The words stable and the hour underlined. Claire filed it in the folder with the custody stamps and the camera maps and the court seal. The city is learning to make a story hold on purpose, she said. They went home when told. The lamp built its circle. The board waited. The ledger lay open to the new page. Robert placed the stamp pouch beside it, the way a family places a photograph that explains a room. He did not see tools. He saw proof of healing. He saw a story that had decided to live in paper, so the house would never have to beg memory for accuracy again. Sophie brought the pen. They stood at the table. Two names set themselves beneath the rules in clear letters. A blank line waited without fear. Robert capped the marker with the exact click that means tomorrow we'll know where to begin. He looked at the board and at the ledger and at the little cloth pouch and understood that this was what happiness looked like when procedure had earned the right to hold it. He set his hand on the table and Sophie set hers on top of his. He spoke the truth. The house had learned, and the city had begun to learn. We saved each other. The line of light under the office drew itself along the floorboards and faded. It was enough that it held. The last thing the house saw was two names under a set of rules written in clear letters. a blank line waiting without fear, and a marker capped with the exact click. That means tomorrow we'll know where to begin. In the end, this story isn't just about violence or rescue, it's about how discipline, truth, and compassion can rebuild a world that's been broken by fear. It reminds us that justice is not always loud, and healing is rarely instant. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a child running toward the light, a stranger choosing to listen, or a man deciding that doing the right thing doesn't require applause. True strength is not in domination, but in protection, and real courage is often the act of staying calm when rage would be easier. As the old saying goes, gold doesn't fear the fire. When our values are real, life will test them, and they will endure. This story asks each of us to look around and notice the silent cries that systems often ignore. It challenges us to confront what's wrong not through vengeance, but through structure, God, and truth-telling. Because every act of fairness, no matter how small, adds weight to the side of justice. We can't control every cruelty, but we can choose to respond with steadiness, integrity, and a refusal to let apathy win. That's how a community changes, one procedure, one promise, one kept door at a time. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what part stayed with you, or share your own story of standing up when it mattered. Hit like if you believe empathy is strength, and subscribe to stay with us for more cinematic stories of courage, justice, and human decency. May your evening be calm, your conscience steady, and your doors, both literal and symbolic, kept open to hope.